Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tom Baker Show. I'm Tom Baker. This show is always powered by TrackTune. You will be seeing and hearing a lot more about TrackTune over the course of the show. And this show going to be a little bit different for us here. We have no guests today. We are going to talk some seriously hot topics because we have a bunch to get through. We've been away for a bit, so a lot's happened over the last couple of weeks in NASCAR and Indycar and Formula One, and we're going to try to break as much of it down for you as possible and show you as much as we can about what we're talking about here. And we're just going to jump right in here, sit back, and you can decide on your opinions about some of these topics. I have mine, and I'm ready to share. Here we go. We're going to start in the world of NASCAR, where when we last did Hot Topics, Austin Dillon was headed to his final appeal for the hijinks that NASCAR say he pulled, getting at Richmond to get the win. And if you recall, he not only drop kicked Joey Logano, but he also hit Denny Hamlin, and it appeared to be a deliberate right hook. You can make up your own mind. Denny into the wall. Dillon wins. Fans cry foul. NASCAR figures they've got to do something about this because, well, he didn't just take out one car, he took out two. So quantity apparently matters here in such end of race decisions. And that's evidenced by the fact that Austin Dillon's appeal was upheld. So in other words, all of the penalties in force, and he was in the playoffs. Now he's out. Richard Childress said this would affect the way drivers deal with the final lap of a race for sure. And he said it cost well over $1 million to the team, obviously, and the loss of the extra money that would have been generated to the team by the win, the playoff berth, and the difference in the benefits of the charter, so to speak. But here's an interesting side note. We went to Darlington for the Southern 500, and we had an incident where Todd Gilliland, who drives for Front Row Motorsports, was racing Chris Buescher, who drives for RFK Racing. Gilliland getting into Buescher and kind of nudging him up into the wall. And then Buescher coming off the wall, hanging a left and right hooking Gilliland into the wall. Now, the footage is pretty clear. NASCAR's reaction to it, however, very different from the reaction to what Austin Dillon did with the right hook, the reaction to what Bubba Wallace did with the right hook, the reaction to what Chase Elliott did with the right hook. Elton Sawyer basically said, we didn't even look at it. It's just racing. No problem here. Really? I mean, the video is very clear that it was a right hook, and you're not even going to take a look at it? This is what I said a couple of weeks ago about the slippery slope that we go down when we start looking at degrees of something instead of it just being all or nothing. When you start trying to nitpick and try to do case by case on, driver contact, this is what you get. Now, I would argue that what happened there changed the outcome of the race. It certainly did for Todd Gilliland. And I don't understand how you don't even look at it or review it, because to me, it looked pretty blatant. It looked like Chris Buescher just said, all right, you nudge me into the wall, screw you. Here you go. And he sent him for a right hook. And again, my opinion, but this for me this is exactly what I worry about with NASCAR. And this is why fans get so upset at them, because they're consistently inconsistent. And it seems to depend somewhat on how the fans feel about it. There wasn't a huge outcry about this. It was two drivers that weren't fighting for a win but there certainly was social media talk about it. And yet, again, not even a review from the boys in Daytona. So we'll see how this plays out as we go through the rest of this season and see how much more contact gets basically ignored by NASCAR. All I think I'm looking for is just a way to be consistent. And to me, one way, all or none. And all is way too dangerous. So let's just cut it out entirely. But NASCAR also wants to be entertaining, and they feel like selling tickets with footage like that is entertaining and draws people to the track and draws people to TV to watch. So interesting stuff, but we'll leave it at that for now. We've got way more NASCAR stuff to talk about. Here's our next item of business. Chase Briscoe, oh, by the way, wins at Darlington. And, oh, by the way, gets himself into the playoffs at the last minute. Chase Briscoe for SHR, a team that is going away after this year, at least as it currently exists. Gene Haas, of course, keeping one Cup car and has formed a new company. But, oh my goodness gracious, Chase Briscoe, and what a pass he made to win. Now, Briscoe went into this basically on, the cut line. But, man, unbelievable the way that Darlington can equalize the competition. We had Tyler Reddick fighting for a regular season championship, which he won, while being sick physically inside of the race car. And now you've got Briscoe going and winning the race and getting himself into the playoffs, which of course begin with a drafting race, more or less, at Atlanta, which is kind of the new way Atlanta races now, right? So Atlanta opens the playoffs becoming a wild card. Anybody's race in Atlanta. Don't count Chase Briscoe out of another strong finish. For that matter, don't count any of the top Fords out of this one. But because it's a super speedway race, anybody virtually can go and put themselves in position to win. It's smaller track, but same kind of racing. So congratulations to Chase Briscoe, who of course is going over to Joe Gibbs Racing for 2025 to replace Martin Truex in the 19 car. Briscoe shows how good he really is and gets a win at Darlington. Now, other things going on in the NASCAR world. Brandon Jones departing Junior Motorsports at the end of this season and will return to Joe Gibbs Racing on a multi-year deal, no less. I don't even know where to go with this. On the one hand, I'm a huge Brandon Jones fan. Brandon is a really, really nice guy, and I think he's a far better racer than the results show. However, he does find himself in a lot of unfortunate situations, not all of them certainly caused by him. But it's interesting that he goes from Joe Gibbs to Junior Motorsports, and now after a couple of years back to Joe Gibbs Racing again on a multi-year deal. And he goes over there at a time when their Xfinity program is kind of struggling a little bit. I mean, sure, Ryan Truex has won a couple of races, and Chandler Smith's been fast and Sheldon Creed's been fast, but they're not getting the kind of results that you typically would expect from Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series. Ty Gibbs has had some strong runs. They're just not winning and dominating the way they did for a while. So could this be an opportunity for Brandon Jones to go back over there and maybe with his experience breathe some new life into that program? We'll have to wait and see, but just an interesting move for Brandon going back over there. And now that opens up two cars at Junior Motorsports, at least for the moment. You've got the 88, which is going to be a full-time car now for Connor Zilic to drive in his first full season of Xfinity competition. But we have the 9 car and the 1 car vacated by Brandon Jones and Sam Mayer, respectively, that are still open. So basically, Justin Allgaier is known. He's not going anywhere. He'll be back in the 7. And you've got the 88 number now being a full-time car. So we'll have to see what Junior Motorsports does here and who ends up in the other 2 cars. One would hope that Carson Kvapil would play a significant part. I think Carson has proven he deserves the opportunity to race full-time in the Xfinity Series. If they can find him the funding, I would think you'd see Carson in one of those 2 cars. Otherwise, it's anybody's guess at this point. A lot of young talent out there that's kind of moving around and looking for places to land. If Harrison Burton doesn't get a Cup ride, could we see Harrison Burton at Junior Motorsports? I could certainly see that happening, but we'll have to wait and see where he goes in Cup, and we'll get to that in a little while. Next bit of news, Christian Eckes moving up out of the Truck Series to drive the number 16 for Kaulig Racing in the Xfinity Series next year. Of course, AJ Allmendinger going back up to Cup after going back down to Xfinity for this year. He goes back to the Cup Series for 2025. And by the way, no definitive word on who his teammate is going to be yet in the Cup Series, as far as I know. I'm not sure Daniel Hemrick's coming back, but it has not been announced one way or the other. We'll have to wait and see, hearing some interesting rumors about that. Also, who will be Christian Eckes' teammates in the Xfinity Series for Kaulig Racing? We know that Daniel Dye is going to be full-time in the number 10 car. What we don't know is if the number 11 car will be driven by Josh Williams again. I haven't heard officially. I haven't heard anything to say that he won't, but I haven't heard officially that he will. So there may be some opportunity for someone else depending on what happens with Josh. Shane Van Gisbergen, who's been driving the number 97 for Kaulig Racing in the Xfinity Series this year, is moving up to Cup in 2025 and sort of going home to the home team, to the big team, major league team, if you will, Trackhouse Racing, fielding the number 88. And, oh, by the way, yes, Dale Jr. approves. Very excited to see the number 88 back. The font is a little different. They've got the little Trackhouse slash through it, which I think is kind of cool. Now here's the question. What can we expect from Shane Van Gisbergen in his first year of Cup racing? Well, here's a thought for you. He may or may not ultimately win a race or be super successful on the oval tracks, though he's picking them up quickly in Xfinity, but this is a different car. But this different car is much more like the car he's been used to driving in the Australian Supercar Series. So irrespective of what he does on the oval tracks, here's something to think about. We're running at least, 6-7 road courses next year. We've got Mexico City being added to the schedule. Again, more on that later. And all you have to do to get into the playoffs is win a race. Would you bet me any amount of money that Shane Van Gisbergen does not win any of the road course races in the Cup Series in 2025? I'll take that bet. I bet he wins at least 2 of them. And so I believe that Shane Van Gisbergen has a chance, especially if the Roval, if he goes shoot, you could go to the playoffs and he could win the Roval and could run up front just enough. And I could see Shane Van Gisbergen in the Final Four next year just on his road course strength. We'll see. Back with more in a moment.
Attention Track and Series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join tracks nationwide on the app today.
For race fans across the United States, GetInTheStands.com is the place to find racetracks where you live and where you're traveling. Just go to GetInTheStands.com and enter your location. You'll see the tracks within 100 miles of that point, either as a list or on a map. GetInTheStands.com is 100% free to use and mobile friendly. So whether you're on a computer, a tablet, or on your phone, there's no need to download an app. To find racetracks across the United States, open your web browser and head to GetInTheStands.com. GetInTheStands.com, your racetrack directory.
Welcome back to the Tom Baker Show. This segment is always being brought to you by Ultimate QM. If you want to get your son or daughter into quarter midget racing, Ultimate QM is a great place to start. They not only will be able to sell you a car, but Ultimate QM, which is family owned and operated right here in Mooresville, North Carolina, in the heart of NASCAR country. Andy Loden is the builder of the cars. Andy's son, Nick, has won about 180 quarter midget races. He knows what he's doing. When you buy from Ultimate QM and you're on an Ultimate QM chassis, they have parts for you. They have setups for you. And they also have trackside support at many of the bigger races. And they'll help you out with coaching your driver as well. So they are a true one-stop shop. UltimateQM.com. You see winners every week on this show that have won races all around the country on an Ultimate QM chassis. Winners win with Ultimate QM. Former quarter midget racer Harrison Burton, like that transition, wins Daytona to get into the playoffs and get Wood Brothers Racing its 100th win. Now, I'm going to talk about two issues here. First thing I'm going to talk about is how totally cool it is that Harrison Burton finally got a Cup Series win. I know. All I heard from the fan base of NASCAR is, well, he was 34th in points and now he's in the playoffs because he won. That's the rule. If you don't like the rule, get NASCAR to change it. But right now, it's winning you're in, and it's Daytona. And it's exactly where a team like the Wood Brothers can still excel. Harrison Burton has been a winning driver in everything he's raced up to the Cup Series. He's had 3 years of utter misery in terms of results, but I don't believe for a minute it's because he's not a good driver. I've said this before. I think the Wood Brothers as a team, and again, I'm not being disrespectful here, but it wasn't a winning team. And I still don't think at this moment it's a winning team. But on a super speedway, again, much easier. The field is much more equalized. I couldn't be happier for the Wood Brothers to get that win. Couldn't be happier for Harrison to be in the playoffs. And here's why. It's because I know and understand that now it's a couple million or several $1 million over the next 2-3 years through, again, benefits of the charter system and the value of the charter and all of that, the resources that they will now be able to afford that they maybe couldn't before. And everybody says, well, this is a Penske car. Well, it's not fielded out of Penske's shop. The Wood Brothers are still crewing the car. The Wood Brothers are still operating the car, and they are getting better as a team. But I think that Harrison Burton kind of got there. And again, not every team is prepared to work with a rookie driver. And I think that's been kind of the tough part. They've had good runs, and then something happens. Either something breaks on the car or Harrison ends up in a wreck that he didn't cause. So I'm super excited about this. The first thing is, I think it's great to see an underdog team like the Wood Brothers, which they are, be able to have that moment where maybe this becomes the transitional that sends them back into a bit more of a competitive atmosphere. I also think it's cool that Harrison got the win, even though he's not going to be driving the car in 2025. We'll see where Harrison goes. I hope he lands in a competitive Cup Series ride with a good veteran crew chief that can take him to the next level. But if not, I hope he ends up at a place like Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series, where he can go win a championship or two, or at least run for a championship, and then get back to the Cup Series in the future. We'll see. NASCAR Cup Series Awards Banquet will be held in Charlotte, North Carolina this year. That's interesting to me. I guess maybe it's less costly to have it in Charlotte than Nashville. I mean, people don't have to go anywhere and, travel and spend the night and all that. But I feel like the tie between NASCAR and Nashville was made stronger by the fact that the banquet was there. So I just find that kind of interesting that NASCAR is moving it back home, which, again, I feel like also has its positives. So we'll see how this goes. But for now, at least, the NASCAR Cup Series banquet will be back home in Charlotte. Okay, next, potential bombshell silly season move. Now, we're going to have to spend a little time on this one. Justin Haley to leave Rick Ware Racing to join Hendrick Motorsports to drive the 48 starting in 2025. Now, I'm going to read this again because I need you to let this sink in. Justin Haley rumored to be leaving Rick Ware Racing to join Hendrick Motorsports to drive the 48 car in 2025. Now, let's just think about this for a minute. First of all, we know that Justin Haley has been rumored for a couple of different cars this year. Justin has said all along he has no interest in leaving Rick Ware. I have thought that the eventuality of this is that Justin Haley ends up replacing Brad Keselowski in the 6 whenever Brad gets around to retiring. I had thought that's one of the reasons why he probably went there. He certainly elevated the 51 to a top 10 car, and it showed what Justin could do even in a car that's, maybe not a top car, but he elevated the performance there. Now, this was talked about on Door Bumper Clear, and Alex Bowman, who currently drives the 48 and is in the playoffs, so by the way, he said, not true. I'm not going anywhere. Well, somebody's lying, right? What would this move set off if it happened? First of all, if you're Justin Haley, you have no desire to leave Rick Ware Racing, and either Mr. H or Jeff Gordon makes a phone call. Do you still have no desire to leave Rick Ware Racing? I mean, how do you turn down, if it was offered, how do you turn down an opportunity to drive one of the best cars for one of the best teams on the circuit? Not that there's anything wrong with RFK, but I mean, who would turn down a chance to drive a Hendrick Motorsports car, right? So I don't know. Maybe there's smoke. I will believe it when I see it. But I will say this. If Mr. H and Jeff Gordon are wanting to make a change away from Alex Bowman, and I wish they wouldn't because I like Alex, but Justin Haley certainly would be on my short list. He's not only great on super speedways, he's a good road course racer. And I think he's, again, one of these drivers that if you put him in a car like the 48 and gave him a year to kind of get settled in and get used to the new team and, new vocabulary, all those things, I think Justin Haley becomes a championship contender and possibly a championship winner. But again, what would this move set off? Alex Bowman has not been talked about as leaving the 48. You've got drivers out there who have signed already with other cars. First of all, some of those guys would probably be shaking their heads, but then what? Because now the 51 car, I would argue, is a better opportunity than it was even a year or two ago. So who would end up in the 51 car? Well, One name that I would seriously consider would be Ryan Preece. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about him in a minute because there's another rumor that has to do with Ryan Preece. But let's get back to the Bowman situation. Where would Alex go? If Alex comes onto the market, what rides are left for him in Cup? Well, possibly RFK with a 51, possibly a front row car, possibly Spire. Don't forget, Rodney Childers is over at Spire now, and we've not named a driver who will replace the departing Corey LaJoie in the 7 car for next year. So does Alex Bowman go over there? That's the place that Justin Haley's been rumored to be going for the last month or two, even though he says, I have no interest in leaving Rick Ware. Unless perhaps, and he didn't say this, but you would have to think, if you get a call from Hendrick Motorsports, you're at least going to listen. So now Bowman's on the market. What else does that change? And is there perhaps a situation where a driver that thought he had a ride for 25 now gets set aside to bring in Alex Bowman? What is the demand for Alex if he's on the market? Again, I'm not believing this, but it certainly seems to have a little bit of smoke. I mean, Door Bumper Clear is at least opining about it. So we'll have to watch this. This is really going to be fascinating. But I think Justin Haley is one of the most underappreciated drivers in the Cup Series, except by other drivers and team owners who know what Justin Haley's capable of. Now, NASCAR going to Mexico City. This has been talked about for months. This is not, to me, huge news. I expected it. It's replacing a Richmond race. To me, this is a small sign that NASCAR is really serious about international expansion. However, I wouldn't get too carried away. I would not expect to see NASCAR in Europe anytime soon. Not with the Cup Series, mind you. I could see them back in Canada, and I think they actually had some interest in that, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. And so I think Mexico City won out in 2025. We'll see how this goes. This is going to be interesting. First of all, Daniel Suarez will be the most popular driver there by a country mile. Now, there's an IndyCar driver named Pato O'Ward who has been given permission by his IndyCar team to compete in Mexico City, but there's a slight problem. IndyCar's racing the same day as the Cup race. He'd have about 3 hours to make that transition. I don't know about all that. That could be an interesting thing to watch. But if you put Pato O'Ward in the Cup Series, and I know a team named Trackhouse who has a car number 91 that's been a part-time car for international drivers and experiments for a couple of years, I would think you're pretty interested in Pato O'Ward. So we'll have to see. And that would be, I think you'll get 300,000 people at that race. It's definitely a race that will pack the track, and it will be extremely successful financially for NASCAR too, I'm sure. Now, NASCAR also announced the Truck Series going to Lime Rock Park in 2025. First of all, I love the idea of this. I'm just hoping they take ARCA along with them. I think it's good to give the trucks a road course. Lime Rock's nice and tight. For those who don't know, Lime Rock is up in Connecticut. It's a beautiful course, and I think the trucks will race well on it. I hope they take the ARCA Menard series and make it a doubleheader, because I think ARCA needs another road course to race on. And honestly, this is exactly the kind of thing I think NASCAR should be doing more of with the Truck Series, putting them on road courses and short tracks. I know the difficulty in short tracks with NASCAR's National Series is they want the safer barriers and all of those things. But there's a point where you're going to have to think about whether the Truck Series, I think, can maybe get away with a few of these things. And there's another track that the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series are returning to in 2025 that I already know the energy is sky high about. We're going to tell you about that right after this.
Attention track and series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system. Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join tracks nationwide on the app today.
For race fans across the United States, getinthestands.com is the place to find racetracks where you live and where you're traveling. Just go to getinthestands.com and enter your location. You'll see the tracks within 100 miles of that point, either as a list or on a map. Getinthestands.com is 100% free to use and mobile friendly. So whether you're on a computer, a tablet, or on your phone, there's no need to download an app. To find racetracks across the United States, open your web browser and head to getinthestands.com. Getinthestands.com, your racetrack directory.
Welcome back to the Tom Baker Show on PowerTube TV. Now, in the last segment, we teased that the Trucks and Xfinity Series are going back to a track where the energy is sky high for 2025. This was something that I kind of knew about prior to the announcement, but quite honestly, I didn't dare believe it until it was announced. The Trucks of the Xfinity Series are returning to Rockingham Speedway in North Carolina in 2025. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Rockingham. We're trying to get some of the folks from Rockingham on the show to talk about all of the revitalization that's gone there, but I can tell you some of it firsthand, because I had the chance to go there for their open house this year, which featured a group called Stock Car Classics, which some of you may have seen at some NASCAR tracks in the last year or two. It's a group of cars from 1950 to about 2006 or so that are either rebuilt Cup cars, restored Cup cars, or replicas of Cup cars. And I had the chance to go there and actually kind of announce their racing at Rockingham during the open house. This group that owns Rockingham Speedway, they've completely repaved the oval. They've completely redone the infield road course. They're working on redoing and upgrading Little Rock, which is the half-mile track that was built adjacent to the big track. And they have made some crazy innovations and done some things to sort of make their facility a destination. For example, if you're in the garage area and they want to throw a big party, they've got disco balls and all kinds of, they can run a full laser light show. They showed us the grandstands, laser lights. It's going to be crazy at Rockingham. They have really made a big pitch. The owner and his staff, I think, have done an absolutely amazing job of rebuilding this course. Not, mind you, this didn't feel to me when we went back to North Wilkesboro, the track was still the track from 20 years ago. They hadn't had time to do a great deal of rebuilding other than what was necessary to field the initial comeback race, which, if you'll remember, was a Cars Tour late model race that featured Dale Jr., who now he liked it so much he just bought the series. But Rockingham did a lot of work in an effort to get NASCAR back there. And I think there were some feelings from some of us who were there back a couple of months that this probably was inevitable, if not for 2025, certainly for 26, because when you look at what they're doing to the facility and you look at the potential for putting on an entertaining weekend of racing with concerts and everything else, which I think you're going to see some of that. That's just my opinion. There's an opportunity here. And honestly, there's an opportunity to do something with the road course at the same time that you're doing something with the oval. Probably not on NASCAR weekend, though, because NASCAR tends to want to kind of control things and keep things to sort of a small and tight schedule. But I think this is going to be a phenomenal show. Here's my plea to the race fans. The owners of Rockingham have done an awful lot of work and put an awful lot of money into this facility with the full intention of and desire to have NASCAR National Series racing back. Will we see a Cup Series race at Rockingham? Here's my thought. If you want to see the Cup Series back at Rockingham Speedway, let me tell you what you must do. You must buy a ticket and show up for next year's race with the trucks in the Xfinity Series. Why? Because that's how NASCAR is going to know that there is interest in a Cup Series race. And you say, well, what if I don't want to go watch the trucks in Xfinity Series? Just do it, because NASCAR is not going to automatically give you a Cup race if nobody's going to support the two smaller series. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, those two series will put on as good or better of a show as a Cup Series cars would anyway. So if you're a NASCAR fan and you have any desire at all to see a Cup race back at Rockingham, go support this race, because it's going to be a big deal. Lime Rock's on Easter weekend, by the way. So an opportunity to have a nice holiday and go to Lime Rock, Connecticut, and enjoy some truck and Xfinity. Rockingham is on Easter weekend. Go to Rockingham and see them. Lime Rock is also an interesting show to go see, and it's in a beautiful area of the country. So go support both of those shows, because NASCAR needs to see that fans will come out to support those series before they're going to put a Cup race anywhere. But Easter weekend's going to be huge. It's nice that at least if NASCAR was going to run on Easter weekend, they're going to do it in their backyard at Rockingham. So that should be a big show. Now, I mentioned Ryan Preece earlier, and I was talking about RFK and the fact that Justin Haley being rumored to leave the 51 to go drive the 48 for Hendrick Motorsports. Again, I'll believe that when I see it. However, The Athletic reports that RFK Racing has potential to expand to a 3-car team with sponsorship from Kroger. Now, it was announced a couple weeks ago that Kroger was leaving JTG Doherty to go over to RFK Racing, which could be and is a huge blow for JTG. I hope they can find a sponsor to replace, or sponsors to replace Kroger. That's going to be a huge blow to Ricky Stenhouse and that team. But again, I think there was speculation as soon as that move was announced that there could be a third car, depending on the level of sponsorship. Well, now it's being talked about. Jeff Gluck in The Athletic reporting that RFK Racing, potential to expand to a 3-car team, Kroger sponsorship. Do you know who they're talking about to drive the car? Well, former JTG Doherty driver Ryan Preece is the guy. Now, Ryan, of course, is going to be out of a ride when Stewart-Haas Racing goes away at the end of the year. Gene Haas retaining 1 Cup team, and Cole Custer, no surprise, going to be the driver of the car. So Ryan needs a place to land. What better a place than to land back with Kroger, who was so heavily involved with his old team, JTG Doherty, for several years. And what a great opportunity for Ryan to go to RFK Racing, a team that is clearly on the upswing. And this could be really Ryan's best shot at proving that he can run up front in a Cup car. Because if they're going to go to a third team, and now that, interestingly enough, makes me wonder about something else. Rick Ware Racing currently is a 2-car team, the 51 car and the 15. We've all assumed that those two cars were basically about like the third and fourth cars for RFK Racing. In other words, a way for RFK to have four cars without having four cars. Well, now if they go to a third full-time car, how does that work? Could Rick Ware Racing still retain two full-time cars, even though it's a technical partnership, okay? But they're inside of the shop. I mean, that the symbiotic nature of that relationship is as stronger than, say, Colleague's technical alliance with Richard Childress Racing is. I wonder how that could work. If NASCAR would say, well, yes, it's still a separate team. They can have their two charters. And in a sense, would that mean that RFK has kind of a 5-car team? We'll keep our eye on that. But Ryan Preece, I think, would be a good candidate for that car. Now, the thing that I want to bring up, though, is if you put Ryan Preece in that car, and if you take Justin Haley out of the 51, now that 51 car becomes an even stronger opportunity for somebody because you got 3 cars for support. So if Justin Haley leaves and goes to the 48, and I'm probably giving this way too much credence, but it's out there, then that could open up a whole other set of dominoes that we can't even foresee right now. So keep our eyes on that. Okay, I want to get now and switch to IndyCar, because IndyCar, first of all, I should mention that IndyCar has taken a beating since NASCAR's announced their Mexico City race, because it's been said that IndyCar should have been already in Mexico City running a race, and Pato O'Ward, who is one of the top personalities of the IndyCar series, is one of the biggest proponents of that thought process. And we mentioned that Pato is and has been given the opportunity to go race in the NASCAR event. Well, if Pato's going to run the IndyCar race and run in Mexico City, I mentioned that perhaps he goes to the 91 car and runs for Trackhouse Racing. But what if he goes to an Xfinity ride and jumps in the number 17 for Rick Hendrick, who has a relationship that's pre-existing through Kyle Larson with the IndyCar team? So do you see where some of this goes, right? Pato O'Ward on his, I believe this is his Twitter account, Pato O'Ward says, speaking of billboards, guess who is not on one? And he puts a picture of NASCAR is back Sunday, August 25th at the Milwaukee Mile. Now, this also brings me to another point that I can discuss about IndyCar. IndyCar ran a doubleheader at the Milwaukee Mile over the Labor Day weekend. And there were people that I know who live within an hour and a half of Milwaukee and told me personally, and they're race fans, they saw no promotion in their area about the IndyCar race at the Milwaukee Mile. Also, that race coincides with the opening of college football season. And you say, well, why is that a big deal? Well, in certain parts of the country, Texas is one, the Midwest is another. They take their college football very seriously. And so you create a natural conflict. Now, I don't really get too much into that because as far as I'm concerned, you should be able to establish an audience for yourself as a major motorsport that doesn't have to concern itself with the NFL or college football or baseball or any other sport. Okay. But Indy at Milwaukee on Labor Day weekend with college football in the area and not heavily promoting it, that is something that, to me, the IndyCar series has got to fix. I remember talking on this show not long ago after the Indy 500 about the fact that the entire Indy 500 broadcast went by, including the rain delay coverage, and not one mention of the next race at Detroit. IndyCar is terrible at promoting their series and understanding how to go in and really build excitement and build energy for a race. Okay, so the racing, they're absolutely fantastic. The highlight for me, easily, Connor Daly finishing third, driving the 78 car, and we're all wondering at this point, why would he not be announced as a full-time driver for that car? Connor Daly did an amazing job in that car. We'll talk more IndyCar and more rumors right after this.
Attention track and series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system. Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join tracks nationwide on the app today.
Welcome back to the Tom Baker Show on PowerTube TV. I was talking about the IndyCar racing at Milwaukee at the end of the last segment. And one of the things that I think gets missed a lot in terms of the differences between IndyCar and NASCAR is that NASCAR is very efficient with promoting their personalities. They get people emotionally invested in their drivers. IndyCar doesn't. And that's why Pato O'Ward would be a little frustrated, because you've got somebody of Pato O'Ward's status who would have this huge fan base reaction if IndyCar were to go to Mexico City. And they never use Pato O'Ward on a billboard. They never use Joseph Newgarden on a billboard. They don't utilize their personalities at all. And that's one of the key differences in the marketing aspect and the entertainment aspect between the two series. And that's why I believe IndyCar shouldn't be even going to Mexico City right now. They should be focusing on fixing some of these types of things before they've got some work to do on the home front, in my opinion. Okay, so now Prema getting closer to putting their 2025 team together. Now, let's talk about Prema for just a second. Prema is a Formula One development team, and it's one of the best. Them forming an IndyCar team opens up an awful lot of possibilities for some of the best drivers from Europe and South America, wherever, to some of the best open wheel drivers to actually have a chance to race in the top series, where they probably wouldn't get to F1 because they just don't have the kind of cash that it takes to get an F1 seat, because yes, you pretty much have to buy it. That's kind of how that works. It's just the way of the world there. So when you think about Prema, then you think about, well, who could this benefit? What kind of opportunities? Well, how about perhaps we see Mr. Logan Sargent in a car? Now, this has been a rumor that I've heard in a couple of different places here. Here's a guy who was in one of the backmarker F1 cars and just couldn't get his career off the ground. He was basically having to overdrive the car to be competitive and really just he never got any traction. Now he's out. Okay. There's a guy, he's from Florida. He comes back home. He jumps in an IndyCar. And if that car is competitive, that driver is going to run as well as anybody. I believe that he's got way more talent than he's shown. It's going to be interesting to see where where he lands, but he is being mentioned as a possible driver for this team. It wouldn't surprise me, perhaps, to see Theo Pourchaire. Okay, Theo, or Teo, as it probably is properly pronounced, is a driver who was displaced from Arrow McLaren this year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Prema put Teo in a car. I think you start with two cars. You put a veteran in one if you can get a good veteran, and you put a younger driver in the other one. And I think you'll be seeing more and more about this team, because they're not going to come in and run in the back. They're going to come in and they're going to put the resources into this to run up front and do well. I think they're going to be a great addition to the series. We're also still waiting to see how the new technical partnership between Chip Ganassi and Meyer Shank Racing shapes up, because Indycar, much like NASCAR, is implementing a charter system for 2025, or at least that's the hope. And that charter system would, again, like NASCAR and its Cup Series, 3 teams per charter. So this means that Chip Ganassi, who has 5, is a team that's going to have to cut back somehow. So how exactly do you keep your teams but not keep your teams? Well, we've seen NASCAR Cup teams form these partnerships and put some of their drivers over here and maybe some over there. I think you're going to see this. I think this is why Meyer Shank and Chip Ganassi have partnered up. No rumors yet or announcements about which drivers would go over to Meyer Shank, but it appears as though at least one of the teams, if not 2, from Chip Ganassi Racing may end up at Meyer Shank. And of course, Chip would still, I'm sure, provide full technical partnership, whatever the relationship needs to be, but they would be under Meyer Shank's control to operate them, similarly to perhaps what we saw with Zane Smith this year in NASCAR's Cup Series, where Trackhouse Racing signed him and then sort of farmed him out to Spire Motorsports to drive the 71. Zane has since been told that he is free to sign with someone else. He's basically out after a year because, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen getting the 3rd opportunity at Trackhouse Racing. And so, again, Zane Smith, a driver in NASCAR, forgot to mention that earlier, but a driver in NASCAR who could land back in the Truck Series, but I can certainly see him in Xfinity at Junior Motorsports, or maybe he goes back to front row. Who knows? It drives the new 3rd Cup car that they're adding for next year. But Chip Ganassi and Meyer Shank certainly have got some work to do if they're going to put things together for 2025. I want to mention, too, Formula One. Kimi Antonelli is headed to Mercedes for next year to team up with George Russell. Now, I've been watching Kimi, and he is a driver. Not only does he have a great personality, but he is, to me, every bit Max Verstappen at his age. Now, this sets up a real interesting scenario for Mercedes, because with Kimi coming in and then the new car coming in 2026, the new rules package, this could bode really well because Kimi's very aggressive. He ended up crashing the car when he tested it, but the team officials weren't plussed by that. They were excited by the fact that they would rather much have to sort of dial him down a bit than dial him up. So keep your eye on Kimi Antonelli, because I think he is going to be a super great addition to the F1 lineup. All right, so let's go back to NASCAR for a second, because the 2025 schedule is now out. And there are a couple of interesting things about the schedule that lead me down a path to talk about future NASCAR talent. Okay, we've talked about a ton of silly season rumors, some driver signings, all of that on this show already. But let's look at the schedule. Okay, we start at Daytona. And then, of course, we go to Atlanta. So we start off with the usual super speedway, then sort of half super speedway race, couple of wild cards. Now we go to a road course, Circuit of the Americas. And then we go on to Phoenix, Vegas, Homestead, and Martinsville, right? That's through the end of March. April, Darlington, Bristol, and here's your wild card next, Talladega, right at the end of April. Now in May, we got Texas, Kansas, and then we go to the open race, of course, and the All-Star race, and then come back to Charlotte. Okay, now in June, watch what happens. Go to a super speedway, okay, or Nashville Super Speedway, which is basically slightly over a mile, right? Then we go to a big track in Michigan, and then we add Mexico City. Okay, now this edition is where I say I think the talent pool for NASCAR's Cup Series in the future, there's a tip of the hand of the future direction of NASCAR here. But let's keep going. Race at Pocono, race in Atlanta to end June. July, right back to basically a road course. It's a street race, of course. It's in Chicago. Then we go to Sonoma, right? Now we're back to Dover and then to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Brickyard 400. By the way, lots of rumors previously about Miami being the championship race eventually again. No, they moved it up in the schedule. August, Iowa Speedway. Thank you. Glad that's back. Of course, then we go back to a road course for Watkins Glen, followed by Richmond, then Daytona, then Darlington, and now we're into the playoffs, right? Worldwide Technology, Bristol, New Hampshire, and Kansas. What a first round that's going to be next year. I love that it starts with a short track, and I love that it includes 2 short tracks to start, because to me, that's a bonus. Then you go to a mile at New Hampshire and you get a big mile and a half at Kansas, probably the best of the mile and a halves. Let's go to October. We're right back to a road course. The Charlotte Roval, Las Vegas, Talladega, and Martinsville. Again, much more of the short track stuff. NASCAR, fix the doggone package, please. And then, of course, we conclude at Phoenix. So it's a good schedule. Not a whole lot of changes. We got some dates going back again. Watkins Glen moved back this year because of the Olympics. They're going back to the regular date. But here's what you got to look at. NASCAR is wanting to add a street race. There's been rumors about San Diego, perhaps. Again, these are just rumors. They're not coming from NASCAR. But I think something to keep your eye on as NASCAR adds more of the road course, street course types of races. Keep your eye on the talent pool that starts to get picked, and keep your eye on some crossover. For example, who's running Watkins Glen for the first time, running NASCAR for the first time in a while? Juan Pablo Montoya coming back to NASCAR at Watkins Glen. Don't count him out. He's driving for Trackhouse Racing. It's a good car. He knows he can go and win. I'm going to predict that Juan Pablo Montoya could quite possibly have a top 10 or better. Now, I want to add one more quick note about NASCAR, because the season opening event, the Busch Light Clash, is now at Bowman Gray Stadium here in North Carolina. Are you kidding me? Well, look, if you're going to put it in a stadium, you might as well bring it home. The only thing I will say is if you're planning to come to Bowman Gray Stadium on February 2nd, 2025, please pack for all seasons, because it's just as likely to be 30 degrees and maybe even spitting a few flakes of snow here as it is to be 60 or 65 degrees and be kind of an early spring day. So, but happy to see the Clash. If it's going to be in a small track, happy to see it coming home. Okay, that is going to wrap it up for this week's Tom Baker Show here on PowerTube. It has been a lot of fun just to sit back, go through the latest news and views, and talk about what's coming up in the future with all 3 of the major divisions. For more exclusive content and stories, Join us at steeringwheelnation.com and on our 24/7 streaming page at watchpowertubetv.com. Visit tracktune.live to find out how you can sign your Tracker Series up so your fans and teams can hear all of the PA action even when the cars are on the track running through their phone or other device. Check out ultimateqm.com for all the info on how to get your young ones started in quarter midget racing. Remember, winners win with Ultimate QM. Make sure that you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Wheel Nation or Steering Wheel Nation on LinkedIn. And of course, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I'm quite active there. It's Tom Baker Media. Until next time, I'm Tom Baker. Look for a special show about the Oswego Speedway and the International Classic coming up soon. And we got some great guests coming up this fall. So remember to keep it tuned right here to PowerTube TVs as part of the Fast Friday block. Our show, 8 p.m. everywhere, right after Pinks and V8 TV. Thanks for watching, everybody, and stay tuned for more programming on PowerTube TV.